Okay, great. So now we are going to move on to Traffic Safety Commissioner's comments. Do you have any comments?
Yeah, I just have one comment. Give me just one second.
You want me to come back to you?
No, I'm actually
Okay.
good. Thank you. There was a discussion a couple months ago in regards to our final mile, or in regards to specifically about dockless scooters. So just recently, I noticed that there was a dockless scooter set up in the city of Carlsbad on the corner of Washington and Oak. There was about 4 or 5 dockless scooters. I was kind of interested in what was going on there. The company is called GOAT, and their actual, I think, office or holding station is on that corner again. I think Oak and Washington is over by the train tracks west of it, over nearby the 7-Eleven, over in between Tamarack and Carlsbad Village Drive. So I guess the question that I have is, are we aware of this, and is the city aware that we have some dockless scooters running around, or do we have?
I'm not aware of it, and I see Craig in the back, and I don't know if he knows if he has any information.
So from what I've seen, since we're talking about this, I've seen that the bicycle program did not pass council that we got proposed on, but then there is some kind of new transit. Maybe we can bring it up on a different agenda, because there is something else that came into effect or plan with Sandak for the last mile, some kind of shared, I saw in the news.
That's the rideshare program.
For the last,
Right.
it was for the
Yes.
last
Sean
month.
may have some information on that.
We keep it brief
Get
since
my,
it's not on the agenda.
Get my first few words in. Hello again. As you may know, the CEQA requirements are changing as of end of June of next year. And a lot of the, thank you. And a lot of the requirements for meeting CEQA guidelines and mitigating your impact if you're a developer is to mitigate your impact through mobility enhancement, not so much like the old ways of widening roadways and improving signals or adding new signals. Those days are kind of gone. So to enhance the operation of transit and other modes of transportation, such as pedestrian, bike, or other modes, there is a big element of including first mile, last mile treatments to where the major transit lines end. And that includes modes such as the rail system we have here, the Metrolink, and we call it Metrolink up in LA. I don't know what it's called down here, Coaster, sorry. For people who get off that to go the final mile or two to their destination, it's very important to make that a more viable mode of transportation. So these things are going to pop up. The bicycles, the scooters. Now, I'm too new here to know what the policies in Carlsbad is to, as it regards to these type of treatments. But in most major cities, including LA, these are being encouraged by the city policymakers to include these treatments to the end of railways or to connect one mode of transportation to the other.
Okay, Sean, just for grounding purposes, we can't go into an extended discussion on the
Sure.
item because this isn't an agendized item. So to the extent you need further information from staff, maybe you could repeat any request you have and staff can follow up on that if they desire to do so. Just because it's not agendized.
Sure.
Yeah.
Council, I think my question was to the staff and to the team is to understand if this GOAT dockless scooter, if we can look into and understand if they are allowed to, or do we have approval for a dockless scooter within the city of Carlsbad?
Just to respond to that very quickly, we had heard that there were vendors that were operating out of a flatbed truck or some sort of system like that.
We hadn't heard about the specific location, so we appreciate that, and we'll definitely look into it.
And I believe I think the last time we had this discussion, it was to bring it to your attention, so I just wanted to.
Right, we appreciate that.
But just the last comment on this is that whatever it's called, the docking station, it is located on the corner of Washington and Oak. And then I noticed that wherever that, there's an office or whatever it is right next to it, adjacent to it, where they have their garage filled with these docking scooters. So my request is to.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I would like to, not anytime in the next month or so, but I would like to get an update on the first mile and last mile, since we got the presentation on the bicycle, and that did not go through with the council. And then I saw that there is some discussion in the news about that Carlsbad did implement in collaboration with Sandak, some first mile, last mile. And I think for the purpose of the residents to know about it, because not everybody maybe read that one post that I saw on the news.
Sure.
In the next few months, whenever.
We can give you an update on that. Be very brief, but we can give you an update on council's decision on that, as well as the ordinance that was passed, shared mobility ordinance.
That would be great, thank you.
That's great.
So I said I was gonna make a motion on the Rancho Santa Fe issue that was brought up. So I would like to move that we request that staff in a reasonable amount of time update us on the status of the projects that were described at the October 2016 Traffic Safety Commission meeting. Provide details on the collisions that have occurred on Rancho Santa Fe Road.
The entire segment?
So we can limit it maybe to that intersection of Camino, Junipero.
I think it was Melrose to
Melrose.
ECR.
Melrose.
Melrose, El Camino around.
Melrose, is that reasonable? Melrose to El Camino Real? Just, so in other words, the types of collisions, was speed a factor, when we're trying to decide what safety measures to take, it's important to know if intoxication was involved, or speed was involved. And then if the latest speed survey and whether the 5 mile per hour exemption would apply. So those are all things that were brought up by the public comment.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second it, for the purpose of the vote at least.
Comments?
I think an update on Rancho Santa Fe is good. We know it's a problem. Yeah, it always has been. And again, an update on a particular stretch of road. As the comment, or the woman who spoke, she mentions that they've been working with staff for quite some time, and lots of updates have happened. I think that's all good work on the city's part, and we ought to see, give them credit for that, and get an update on see what it's doing. So.
I will make sure Lieutenant Collar will be part of that presentation.
Absolutely.
So they are.
Yeah, and they were the last time we did that too. The PD was involved in the discussion on the accidents and stuff. So we knew specifically that that Mustang and things that were.
Okay, ready to vote? Please note it passed unanimously with Commissioner Pensier being absent.
And then I had a question. So at our last meeting in June, we voted to request that staff send an agenda item to the city council to prepare a preliminary work plan for us, and I'm wondering on the status of that.
So I looked at the June 3rd agenda. There wasn't any agendized item in order to forward something to the council. Because that was how, at least the information I got from staff on what that motion was to request that city council consider a preliminary work plan. Additionally, there isn't an allowance for a preliminary work plan in the code. It speaks to the annual work plan and amendments to that. So I don't think there's any valid action that comes out of that motion based on it not being agendized and the fact that the code speaks to an annual work plan and amendments to that.
Okay, so then this is another example of why we need our work plan. So I want to make an alternate motion to, again, request that staff come back as soon as possible with their long-term mobility element implementation plan and a draft work plan that we can start working on. The reason for that, I made this motion in the past several months ago. I'm just reiterating it in today's municipal code update. It says we won't start, basically they're not going to start working on a work plan until after the adoption, which could be September or October. And so our 2019 work plan is going to not be adopted until 2020 at this point. So I don't think there's anything in the municipal code update that's going to change what our work plan is. So it'd really be nice if we could start working on that. I submitted a draft work plan many months ago. So anyway, I'm going to make the same motion I did a few months ago and ask them to come back with a draft work plan and not wait until December.
We have the recordings, right? Because we don't have any meetings from June 3rd. But you said you looked at them.
You got the recording.
Okay, so in the recordings, I don't know if you listened to them, I apologize, I did not listen to it. Is it stated that we made a motion for this to go?
I listened to that, but I'm not completely sure that that motion was there. So my minutes are not ready, so.
So whether or not I'm assuming a motion was made in providing this advice. So if a motion wasn't made, then it's a moot point for that reason alone. But the concerns that I flagged when I was told there was a motion made to request that council consider a preliminary work plan was that there was no agendized item. So you're forwarding an item to council that wasn't on the agenda. And if you look at the code and how it couches the work plan that can be developed by the commission, it's an annual work plan, and then that annual work plan can be amended. It doesn't speak to a preliminary work plan outside of those two things. So given those two reasons, I don't think there was a valid motion that was made. So when I say no valid motion, a motion was made, it just wasn't valid. So no action is going to
So
come out
what
of that.
can we do?
You can
Which is what I'm going to propose.
Okay.
So we just discussed, August 20th is when we're going to present the draft ordinance, and so early September is when we're looking at hoping to have the ordinance adopted. So what the Senior Commission has done, which is the one that's the furthest along, is had a facilitated session, if you will, with the commissioners and with staff there to help develop the work plan. And so what I was going to propose from a time certain, which you're already in 2020, but I was going to propose that with September being the adoption of the ordinance, so we have the specific direction from council on what this commission will be responsible for, is looking at October having a facilitated session in which whatever was discussed before, whatever you want, can be presented for discussion at that point in time.
Comments?
I just don't understand why we can't start discussing it. Like one really sort of obvious thing to me is staff can look at the mobility element. There's a list of 30 or so policies in there, and they can tell us which ones of these they believe we should look at and which ones they don't believe. Like they can just, if we don't start, it's going to take months to do this. If we don't get started, it's going to be well into 2020 before we have a 2019 work plan.
So that was why I was saying we should have a facilitated discussion in which at that point in time, staff's presentation, which is, as you were outlining, will be part of, or a starting point, and also the information that the commissioners have provided to date with regards, I had mentioned back in March, I think that was the first conversation that was initiated, and there were comments that were included. I believe Doug was here and took notes on what the commissioners submitted at that time. So there have been conversations, and staff will take that time in October and have the information that had been collected to date and have a facilitated session with the commissioner so that we can pin it down and get to what it is that we think that the draft work plan will look like.
Ken, how does the commissioners feel? Comments?
I mean, I think that's looks like the schedule we're on. We'll be putting together a 2020 work plan now. But it is what it is.
Yeah, I personally don't think that 2 months is gonna make any difference at this point. I understand where Commissioner Lincoln comes from, and I wish we could do much more, but.
I guess my point is if we don't start for a few months, then it's gonna take more months to, it's not like we're gonna finish
Right,
it.
but do we have any legal way of doing this? I mean, what can we do right now? If, let's say, we don't wait until October, what could we do? Anything sooner?
So it's envisioned that this will be a collaborative process between staff and the commission. So because you can't direct staff, so it is really, and considering staff's resources and how they can allocate those timing wise, this is the conversation that has to occur in terms of when staff can bring it back. I can tell you that it will involve our office's review on the front end, so whatever proposal has been worked up so far, we have to undertake a review. Usually there's multiple departments that are affected by these work plans. Even though it's traffic, quote unquote, it generally affects particularly CED. That's why Debbie was here on the other item. So it may seem like it's dragging it out, but from our perspective, there's actually a lot that has to go on behind the scenes before we come in front of you, and before we can speak intelligently about the pieces of the work plan. Part of the issue here is that this is a new format, the work plan format for the boards and commissions. So I imagine in future years, this will be a much easier process because you'll be refining your work plans versus the first stab where there is nothing to work from other than your historical items, which from what I'm hearing, you want to depart from those in a lot of areas. So that's going to be, I think, where that internal review needs to happen on the front end. But in terms of legally forcing this any sooner, it's going to be when staff can bring it back and commit to that.
Any comments from staff?
One of my concerns, quite frankly, is the cart before the horse. And so the ordinance is what gives us and directs us to say, this is what City Council wants. And so there have been instances I have heard that sometimes things, even though they were introduced, can be changed or tweaked before they're adopted. And so to us, the direction is from City Council. And once the ordinance that says this is what we want to happen, they make it happen, it becomes effective, then those are our marching orders, which would be in September, and which would lead us into the first opportunity, which is in October.
Yeah. Commissioners. Commissioner Lincoln.
I don't want to prolong this, but we heard for months that we have to do the work plan before we do the municipal code. And then we went back to we have to do the municipal code before the work plan, and then we went back, and now we're back to the, we flip-flop 4 times now. I don't know when it ends, but hopefully in September.
Any other commissioner comments? At this point, I mean, until we have the approval of the council, we're not even mobility, right? So, and like Paz mentioned, we have new hope, new management, new that we're not gonna go back and forth, that what we're hearing today, we can trust that's gonna happen, so I'm hopeful I'm okay with October having a special meeting, a workshop, because I do, and we did been talking about this, we do need a workshop. We can't just make it here. This is not, it's gonna be more elaborate. So that's my recommendation. Commissioner Fowler has comment?
So I even seconded the motion, so there definitely was a motion. And in context for me, it seemed like staff had some anxiety about how replacing the tools to determine service levels and things like that they kind of wanted help and how to facilitate that. And I think we're a mechanism to do that, to help staff do that. And there was also the implication that nobody knew about this, that there was a sea change in the tools and that was going to make a big change to the way potentially projects would be evaluated. But then I discovered a Facebook page that had all of that stuff on it. So now I think, well, people do understand.
You're referring to the level of service?
Yes, correct.
Discussion. Okay.
And that's
Just
what
clarifying.
drove my interest in saying, well, that, you know, this is sort of the thing where that is obvious and so forth. So, well, we tried and this is not possible for technical reasons and so forth. But now I think people are aware that now that if it's on Facebook for gosh
We
sakes,
get all our
information
possible.
I'm not touting that, I'm just making the observation. And so it's a process, it's a root canal we're experiencing. So I tell all of my consulting clients, this is going to be a root canal and the Novocaine is wearing off. So yes, it's going to be uncomfortable, but this is the process, and in the end, your teeth will be just awesome. So it's patience here, and I totally appreciate people having not patience because I'm a very impatient person myself. But
Okay, so we're
so
dropping the motion.
I think we just have to let that particular thing go.
Yes? Okay. Do we have to do anything legally, any words
Yeah,
I
there's a
have to-
motion on the table, so either you have to vote to table the motion, or you can have to withdraw the motion.
So we're gonna withdraw the motion? Would you like to withdraw the motion?
And that hasn't been seconded either, so it can just die if it doesn't get seconded.
I die a lot, that's fine. I'm used to it. No shame.
Okay, so we didn't get a second. Are we good? It's gonna die?
Okay?
I need some input. I know it's late.
It's Commissioner Fowler's turn.
No more.
Yeah, he's good. I just had, I don't know why I had a feeling that he said he seconded. I think you were talking about seconding the LOS, the level of service last time. motion.
Last time.
Yeah, because you said I second the motion. I'm like, did I miss
No,
that?
I seconded the motion, yeah. I'm sorry.
Okay. Okay, so I think we're good. I think.
No,
No?
you haven't got to me yet.
No, I know. I
Oh, you're
mean,
good on
like,
that,
on that
okay.
one thing.
All right.
So Commissioner, just make sure, Commissioner Fowler, do you have any comments on the Commissioner's comments?
No.
So, okay, good, Commissioner Hunter.
Melrose and PAR. I just looked earlier today, and it was July of last year that all the striping changes were made with the continued safety hazard with the number 3 lane going into the right turn lane. We talked before, and our Commissioner was using that extra space for bike safety and stuff like that. Every other month I bring that forward. Every other month I've been told and promised, and it's in the minutes, that staff would come back with thoughts and recommendations on signage, stripage, and all the other things associated with that. And for Alphonse and Paz's deal, I copied the mayor and as a personal citizen, as well as the city traffic engineers and the police department on all my concerns back then, because I wasn't getting any response from the traffic department. And that helped stimulate, and it's now a year later, and we still have the same issue. And I usually only just say Melrose PAR and let it go, but since we have a whole new group of people here,
They listen to us.
Huh?
They listen to us, yeah.
This group is potentially listening to us. It's, hi, Cos.
Hello, sir. I heard you loud and clear with regards to the action items that have continued for the last year or so that had been promised, that staff said will come back and hasn't been teed up. And I understand the frustration that's associated with that. And I also understand staff's perspective with regards to we can only stretch them out so thin. So what I would propose to do is that for the next meeting is we'll take that laundry list of things and realistically take a look at what can be done and present it to the TSC or TMC. Well, it'll probably still be a TSC for your consideration and prioritization.
And again, so for your knowledge, that was all that striping, changing, and everything else was done without it ever coming as even an information deal to the Traffic Safety Commission. So it was kind of a real surprise that day when everybody was all in the wrong lanes and the accidents were happening. Everybody rushed out real fast to block off those lanes because nobody understood what was going on. And I had to thank Doug because I saw it right after it happened, and I contacted him, and he went there and at least got some of the safety issues corralled right away. Thank you.
Okay.
Vice Chair Johnson.
I have a couple of things. Thank you as a little reminder. Probably 6 months ago or more, we had a briefing about the restriking of Avenidas and Cenas between Cannon out to Alomar Airport Road. And at that time, the question was, could we reduce the speed limit there? Because it is not an arterial road, it's just a connector per se. And the comment was that we would review that once it was restriped. So I'd like to see if anybody has gone back and revised, looking at this, reducing the speed limit there on Avenidas and Cenas.
Again,
I understand.
there, but I will follow up on that one
Yeah,
as well.
I
will
appreciate
include it in the next month meeting.
And my other comment was, the other day I was driving from 101 eastbound on La Costa Boulevard, La Costa Avenue. And I'm assuming it's the Leucadia city that did this and not Carlsbad. But they painted the bicycle lanes green, and it's Encinitas?
Yeah.
Okay. It is so obvious where the bike lanes are, and I really give the city kudos for that, because as we all know, 101 is a major bicycle lane, and routing there, it's superb, and I would like to see the city look into that. Maybe not right away, but, you know.
Yeah, that's when my past life in City of Santa Rosa, that was a grant that we received from state at about $78,000, but we managed to stretch it far enough to do about 40
Yeah.
locations. Not specifically painting all the bike lanes green, but
No.
some of the transition areas.
Right.
And we're looking into that, and we are already planning on doing a couple of them near the Costco area.
Yes, and I certainly understand, and I'm not asking for all the bicycle lanes to be painted green in the city, but major routes, particularly the Carlsbad Boulevard, that is a major bicycle route, so that would be the primary. And I know in the city council, they just asked for an analysis to be done for pedestrian safety along the 101 of the boulevard. So I think that would go in conjunction.
That too. We did that too, that's the council. We talked about it.
We talked about it.
Doing all the crossings after we had the fatality.
Right, but, so, that's my suggestion, is to look, painting the bicycle lanes, especially on primary roads.
And transition areas and.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay, and no more comments? You guys covered everything, so thank you. Made my life very easy. I have no comments. So, anybody else has comments before we adjourn at 7:40? Hey.
This is early.